Thank you very much. Am I allowed to stand, actually? It would be easier for me. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if the presentation is going to be really that short and quick. Vicente told me I may not be brief, so I think we need to go back to the beginning of it, and I will still try to keep it as short as possible, but I would like to outline the most important milestones. So we have been doing all those beautification projects since 2015 in Tatarstan, and we actually were the first region after Moscow to undertake such an initiative, and it was initiated by Mr. Minnikhanov, the president of the Republic of Tatarstan. And I think that we have managed to achieve some impressive results because it's, as Nadia has already said, 328 spaces, which is a lot. And the more impressive part of it is that, as you can see here, it is scattered around the 45 areas, municipalities in the Republic of Tatarstan, which basically makes the task much harder because you have to oversee the construction of 60, 70 objects simultaneously every year, which are quite distanced from each other. But you know, any challenging task is more fun. We started in 2015 with having 1 billion rubles, which might sound like a big amount of money for students, but actually in terms of prices you normally have for construction works, basically it's not too much because I think that all the money we have spent for those 328 objects scattered around Tatarstan is altogether less than the cost of the Zaryadye Park. So it's just for you to compare, because whenever you work for the state and you want to develop it, money and cost efficiency is a really crucial thing to look into and to take care of. I think that we are getting nominations now from a lot of important prizes. I will not be able to name them now because it's not officially announced yet. But the things that are getting nominations, of course, certain objects like the Kaban Lake, which was on the first slide, they are nominated. But I think that the most important and interesting thing is the general approach that we use in order to develop the public spaces. And you can look at the scheme here, which basically describes all the stakeholders that are taking part in this process. And what is important, speaking of urban development in general, and also, to my mind, which is a very, like an extremely important skill for the architects, is the ability to communicate and to bring together interests of different stakeholders, because it's amazing when you have a nice project, but if the project is just nice and you enjoy it as an idea, but it does not cater to the interests of different stakeholders, it is most likely not going to be a success, because it is all about bringing together the interests of different parties. So just for you to get an idea, we obviously have a lot of official structures which set the tasks for us, which are the Ministry of Construction, Housing and Utilities of the Russian Federation, and the Ministry of Architecture and Construction of the Republic of Tatarstan. Also, obviously, my main client is the President of Tatarstan and the Republic of Tatarstan, representing the interests of the citizens of Tatarstan. But speaking of all the other important stakeholders, it's very important to acknowledge the fact that we work with city activists, that we engage different public space users, that we try to work together with the contractors and with the equipment manufacturers, because whenever you want something unique to take place and to happen, you really need to work with each person in this process quite closely. Otherwise, it might not take you to the place where you want to go. Another important thing here is you can see here Karina, girls from our Arc-Descent, which is a team in Tatarstan, and you can see that all the people who actually create these spaces are your age. I mean, they are yesterday's students, and some of them even come to our team and work on actually constructed objects, being students of last years in university. So it's very important, and we have a very strong belief that you don't need to be super experienced to work on that sort of space. Of course, you need a curator who knows what you're doing, but actually, in many cases, it's more important to be, to be young and motivated rather than to be experienced, because experience is sometimes something that puts a lot of pressure on you and does not let you look at things freely and makes you less open-minded. So this is the team we created, because when I came to Tatarstan, there was a big problem to find architects who could do that for us. You see, in Russia, in the Soviet Union since the 1980s, I think, there have been very few public spaces created because the country had different problems, there was not enough money, it did not go in this direction. So there were a lot of people with theoretic ideas about what it is to create a public space, but actually quite few people with experience. And the only people who had experience, which was up to date, were the people who worked with in Moscow under the former Minister of Culture of Moscow, Sergei Kopkov, who was my boss from 2011 till 2015. And when I came to Tatarstan and I realized that there are not too many people to work with, and the plans were ambitious, we wanted to build more than 100 parks in the first year. The problem was we did not have the architects, and when I called my friends from Moscow if they could come over and make the projects for us, the cost that they wanted for their job was like, one park in the center of Kazan should have cost us 1/5 of all the money we had for all the projects, for all the 100 projects. So it was, obviously just impossible. And we had to start coaching professionals for ourselves. I think it was quite a successful undertaking. We asked the Moscow Architecture School, Marsh, to assist us with that because we did not have Vicente at the time. And then Vicente came, and we have some of our colleagues from Tatarstan who are studying here now, and I hope at the end of the year they will be coming back to Tatarstan to help us improve the vision of urban development. We also organized the Young Architect Biennale, which was quite a success, and we are just coming from a meeting now with Sergei Choban, where we have been discussing the second Young Architect Biennale of Russia, and I think it will be taking place this October, again in Innopolis in Tatarstan, which is another important undertaking because we strongly believe that young architects can not only deal with public spaces, that such tasks as living or I will not announce the topic of the next Biennale now, we will have a separate event for that. What we strongly believe in is that young architects are capable of setting the new standards, not only in terms of architecture, but also in terms of professional attitude, of how you collaborate with the client, be it business or be it state. So I think that's what we are working on, and the good news for us is that the outcome of this first Biennale we had, out of the 30 finalists, 12 got actual contracts for development, because the topic was housing, so 12 teams got actual contracts for developing housing in Russian regions, which is an extremely good rate, and I think that it's very promising because the demand for trained architects with a vision is extremely high nowadays. We don't only train architects, we also sort of created a new job for Tatarstan, which is managing parks. So this is a team of park managers in Kazan who are responsible for certain public spaces, because it's not enough to just construct something, you need to think of how it is going to be functioning. afterwards, what events are taking place, how people come there, how they feel there. Everything has to be clean. You need to have light. It's very important. We had a competition, and we had a competition of 20 people for one position. So we had a nice option to select the professionals to do that job for us. As I said, you need to work a lot with the manufacturers and you need to develop them. And the good thing is that when I came to Tatarstan, we had 12 manufacturers who were doing benches or street lighting, and I should say it was pathetic. We have 75 manufacturers who sell to 37 regions of Russia, which means that when we invest state money into these programs, we do not just give it away to get the parks, we also invest in their businesses developing, because when they know there will be some money coming, they can buy equipment to make better street furniture, to develop the technologies. It's extremely important, and it's the way you make local economy work. So this design, for example, was created in the village of Muslumovo, 320 kilometers away from Kazan, with 8,000 inhabitants. So it's really a tiny place in the middle of nowhere. But we have people there who can create quite competitive design and who can manufacture it and who are very cost efficient and who sell outside of Tatarstan. Well, we work a lot with heads of regions of Tatarstan because it is also extremely important to develop the mayor, you know. You cannot just come, I mean, you can, but it will not be sustainable because when we go into this discussion of modern Russia, I think you have all heard of different stories when there is a mayor of one city who is against any progressive project and he even has the project but doesn't want to construct it. Some people think that the only thing you need is put a lot of concrete on the bank of the river with no notice of the fact that it's not ecological, that it's doing harm to nature. It's just their vision. They are people coming from different generations. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to educate the mayors and to improve their vision. And this is another quite important task. I think we have been quite successful in that because now we have in many regions of, I wouldn't say in every area of Tatarstan, but in quite a few of them, we have sustainable teams when the mayor has a vision and he has a chief architect who is young and who is trying to change everything for better. So I think it's important, another important point. Participatory design. I don't want to go into a lot of details about that because I really want to get into a discussion. I can see you're going to be bored soon otherwise. But I will tell you one story. When I just came to Tatarstan and I was 24, and it was hard to explain to anyone why a 24-year-old girl will be a big boss. We had and people in Tatarstan, because this is, well, a territory which has a lot of young, talented, educated people, were quite uncertain why you need to bring someone from outside. And they were not friendly at the beginning, let's be honest. So when I came, there was a horrible tragedy. For me personally, not just for some of the people, because there was this willow. It was growing in one of the old parks called Uritsky Park. And the contractor who was performing the works there, one evening decided that this willow, which was 80 something years old, was causing a lot of trouble because he needed to change the pathway, and he didn't want to do that. And also because the pond had a concrete bank, which was undermined by the roots of the tree. And also the House of Culture, you can see on the back, had also, it was 70-something years old. I mean, it is, we have renovated it now. But the foundation of it was also being cracked by the roots, because the roots of this willow were obviously very strong. So the contractor just thought it doesn't make a lot of difference, and he just cut it down. I wouldn't even call it unhappiness, it was rage from the people who lived there, because a lot of people had memories connected to this tree. Someone was walking there with their mother, who might have been gone by then. Someone was having some romantic moment under this willow. So, you know, people were furious. And it was, and I was being heavily criticized, because you bring some girl from Moscow and she knocks down a tree we all love so much. So I think it was one of the hardest moments, and it was the moment when it became so obvious to us that if we do not discuss everything we do with the people, we will end up ruining something that is important to them. So what we did is we tried to create a whole strategy of engaging people, and as the outcome, we have a book, a manual on how to engage people from the very beginning. So we bring people to a room. We normally have a room of 400 to 800 people coming. We put them into groups and we ask them to work together on the project. We don't ask them for the architectural vision, but we ask them to identify the functions they want to be there. If they want a toilet or if they don't want a toilet, if they want a dog's playground or if they don't, if they want a kid's playground, if they want a fountain, like anything they could potentially have, we have stickers for that, so they sit around the map of the space and they give us a functional task. So they create a program for the space. And this program becomes the task for the architect. And then the architect comes, and the architect comes, like, so we bring them together, they make presentation of what they expect, they talk to each other, they quarrel a lot, but then we have a clear idea of what people ask for. And then the architect has to meet this program. And when we meet again in a month or in a month and a half, we invite the people again to come, and we make the architect present the concept to them, and they have to react. And before we get 3/4 of the people approving of the project, we do not start going into any detailed design or construction works. In some cases, we change the project for 6 or 7 times. But the most important thing is that as the outcome, we get something people definitely approve of and people are happy with, because we're not implementing the vision of one architect. We are the state and we are working for the people, and we make the people the actual client. And even I know that architects are quite uncertain about this approach at certain points, because they say, why would the person know better what to put or not? I've been trained for 6 years in university to know what has to be there. But the thing is, sometimes it's even better to make something less progressive, although you will see that the things we do are actually quite progressive. But to make it something that suits the people feel that it belongs to them, because it's very important not to raise the plank too high, otherwise people will not appreciate it. And it's something you should always keep in mind, I think, because the worst mistake you can make is do something too good that to be appreciated. So these are some of the areas we made together with the citizens, because in this specific case there were guys who wanted to do extreme sports and came to us saying they don't have any space for extreme sports, and we designed it together with those guys, and we built it together with those guys, and then it's been heavily used. In some cases we make citizens invent the symbol, so unfortunately I cannot put it closer, but this is 2 girls in a far-off village in Tatarstan called Aktanish with 12,000 inhabitants. And they came up with an idea to make the symbol of the park, of the embankment actually that we made there, to be a white swan, which takes us back to the origin of the name of this village. So what we did is we turned it into a design, and it is now quite popular there. It's the new symbol of the village. But no good designer would have ever been able to think of that, because it's the creativity that comes from the people, and no person not coming from there originally would have been able to do something like that himself. A lot of other cases, I won't go into too much detail. Also now we have started, we actually are announcing the next round of these discussions tomorrow, when we not only ask the people to discuss how this or that space should be developed, but we also ask the people which spaces need to be beautified at first place. So it's about the citizens setting priorities. It's another quite important thing for us. I really want to keep it as short as possible, so I will be just demonstrating some of the projects we made. This is the village called Tulichi, of less than 3,500 population. And they had a problem because here in the center, this small river called Tuliachka River, in spring, it would flood everything around, and children would not be able to cross it to get to school or something. So this very project actually united the two halves of the village, brought it together, and because it's right in the center, very close to the central street. And also, of course, we introduced the kids' playgrounds, some visual points, and some amphitheaters. But the thing is, we made it very ecological, because instead of the concrete the mayor wanted to put alongside the riverbanks, we made it very natural. So when the water comes up, it's up, and people just use these pedestrian bridges. When it goes away, you just wash the stones and everything, and you start using the lower level. And it's very ecological, because it does not create any trouble for all the creatures that live there. And it does not create even more flooding down the river, because every time you use concrete on the banks of the river, somewhere down the flow, you will cause a problem. This is my favorite village of Muslumova. And we have managed for 50 million rubles, which is very little, 50 million rubles, we have managed to create an embankment that is 3.5 kilometers long, with a lot of objects on its banks. And it's really extremely beautiful, and we even get people coming for wedding photo sessions there, although it's like literally in the middle of nowhere. It's not an exaggeration what I'm saying. This is Laisheva, which is where the rivers Volga and Kama merge, and it's 42 kilometers wide at one place. So you actually feel like you're standing on the shore of the sea. And it's only 70 kilometers from Kazan, so in summer a lot of people would come there. We have created an embankment, and we have created a nice beach, and we have actually caused a lot of change in the local economy, because what happened is that before we had this embankment, it was some dirty, forgotten place, but the people who were living on the front line, they were quite happy, because there was no one in front of their homes. Now, when we have up to 50,000 people coming there every day, people started selling their houses, but instead of private homes, people buy it and make it hostels or hotels, which totally changes the economy of the place, because when you have, during summer months, 50,000 people coming daily for a place that is 8.5 thousand inhabitants, this is a huge opportunity for local business, and this develops the territory a lot. I won't go into all the details. By the way, this is this Aktanish place. You can see the swans here. It's also quite, I mean, Tatarstan is quite beautiful. It's a lot of picturesque sites. This is Arsk. It's an amazing space. This has been created for 37 million rubles, including all the earthworks, because this is an artificial pond. So we dug out all the earth, we fortified the how you call it? No. The bed, yes, sorry, thank you. We fortified the bed of the pond, and we brought spring water. You can see here, there's a small fountain, which is actually the spring coming down from the ground. And we have managed to create all this equipment, which actually does not look at all worse than what you have in Moscow. And when I presented this project to Mayor Sobyanin, he asked me if this is, It was not this exact project, but I showed him some pieces of furniture, and he said, "Is this in Moscow?" I said, "No, it's Tatarstan." And it's many times cheaper, I should say. This is, for instance, the city of Bavli, 22-something thousand inhabitants, and this is the main square. And I mean, I think that looks impressive because you don't get such a main square in very many cities which are above 1 million citizens. But somehow a small place in Tatarstan gets it because of the approach of my boss, the president of Tatarstan. This is Bugulma, and the important thing is that you can see we make unique objects for every space. It's never unified, it's always an approach to the space, to the place. This is Almetievsk, the beach we created there, incredibly popular. Some other places there. This is a beach in Zelenodolsk. This is the city of Nizhnekamsk, and this is a small part of this park, which is 42 hectares altogether, but you can imagine the scale because, I mean, this is the size of the person. It's like literally huge. And this is also an embankment in Nizhnekamsk, which is also very impressive. So in this picture, it is from 2016. We only made the first part of the embankment, and this part, which is not yet constructed here it comes. So this is where the previous photo I've shown you is located. And this is Nabережные Челны, this is Kazan, a kids park. This is the boulevard we made this year for the FIFA World Championship, for the World Cup. This is the Gorkinsky-Ametievsky forest. This is the Black Lake, the oldest park in Kazan and in Tatarstan. This is one of the newly inaugurated spaces, which is called the White Flowers, following the name of a very important novel by a Tatar writer, which is about the doctors of Soviet times. And this is very symbolic, and it was a place which was all used by cars. But anyways, not to go into too many details, this is the Kaban Lake. Yes, this is the previous works were the works of the company Touriscape, who won an international architectural competition. Vicente and I are good friends with Dr. Konjang Yu, who is the head of this company. And we are very proud that we are the only people, obviously not mentioned in Moscow with Zaryadye Park, who managed to hold an international competition and managed to work together with the winners all the way through, ending up with the construction. And they are now overseeing the construction of the second phase, which is starting this April. So it's very important to respect the professional and to work together all the way through. And we, I think, have come to some extraordinary results. I mean, you can see how resilient it all is. So this is for you to get an idea of what it was like before and after. Yeah, I think it's quite obvious, doesn't need a lot of commenting. And a lot of ecological approach, which has extremely impressive results because they introduced some water cleaning systems, and you can here see the effect of how you can actually raise the quality of city waters just by doing some ecological beautification, not any chemical cleansing system, without introducing it. I don't want to keep all of this here, so I would ask Vicente to let me stop and carry on with some discussion. Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Vicente.
Yeah, I think that this is an impressive presentation with the introduction and also this huge amount of work with a lot of intensity. So I was thinking that I discovered some pattern because obviously something that you show here is something that somehow happened in some other cities before. But then, for those that are interested, I am a city hunter. So I love to hunt places that are happening incredible things. And then after, I would say, the 80s in Barcelona, that was a very initial moment with young people. That is a great strategy, inviting young people to do such a kind of projects. But then another place that was doing similar things was Medellin. Medellin and Colombia, with the Mayor Fajardo, was also another city that was doing this kind of actions. A third city will be Bandung in Indonesia. Bandung had a mayor that was an architect, and again was doing cheap, fast, and beautiful projects. And then Kazan, no? So I think that you has introduced Kazan in this kind of genealogy of incredible cities that are, or places, because you are working more in a country or republic level. So my first question will be if, I mean, everything that you explain here is part of the manual of how to do such a things to transform the cities anywhere. The question is, did you learn from anything or any place, or beyond your short experience working here in the Gorky Park, how did you learn to do all of this?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the appreciation you gave me and the whole of our team. You always have to look at the best practices, it's obvious. But I think that you should not spend too much time doing that, because every place you work in has a unique context. It has, because I'm working for the state, and I came to a very specific political environment. So I think, because I'm not an architect at all, and I'm not even trying to pretend I am one. So I think that it's that the thing that we're discussing here is the managerial approach. It's not about art and personal vision. I never try to work instead of the team who are responsible. I mean, it would be stupid if I directed Dr. Yu on how Kaban should be. So I think the most important thing is, first of all, to create respect for the profession, because I think that the most trouble we have is because people in Russia, especially officials, high-rank officials in Russia, are just not used to respect the architect. And I should say it's not only the high-rank officials who are to be blamed for that, but also because you mean a lot of different approaches among your profession as well. And sometimes when I meet certain people who are supposed to have a lot of experience and vision, I look at them and I think, well, if I were the mayor, and if I were 60, and if I were meeting them when I was 30, I would have also come to the conclusion that architects are just useless, crazy dreamers who are incapable of making anything come to life. So I think it's very important that this collaboration should be both ways. And yeah, I think that the answers would be, first, respect for the architect. Second, make the architects be realistic and adequate to the task, because, I mean, third is make something, because none of this would have happened if we did not engage the people. The only thing that guarantees, that secures the continuity of this process is people being content, people being satisfied and happy with what is happening to their mother town. Because if they're not, it would have never continued, and the budgets that I operate with have increased 5 times over these 5 years, like the yearly budgets. And this is only happening because any manager, he actually, well, looks at the efficiency of the money he invests, and if he sees that it's working, he is willing to invest more. And I think that we here come to an answer to a very important question of why all those projects are so popular all over Russia, if I may comment on that. because I think this is the, you know, this is the incognito, the terra incognita. Everybody is wondering why that works like this, and I think that there are a few reasons. First of which is that it's very cynical for any big state boss. This is, I mean, to build a school for 1,000 kids, you need to spend 1 billion rubles for one school for 1,000 kids, together with all the, you know, technique, everything. And you will get those kids, their parents, maybe their grandparents engaged, but no one else. These will be the people who appreciate it. I'm not saying that you should not be building schools at all, but you need much less money to create a public space, which, if you do it right, will be appreciated by everyone who lives in the city. So, for instance, the Kaban Lake, which is a huge project for the city, this one, costs twice less than a school for 1,000 students, 1,000 pupils. So it's a very cost-efficient way of making change, an obvious change, an appreciated change. I think that this is the first, and I think that this is, to be honest, the key reason why this program is so popular, and because it evolved from Tatarstan. We started in 2015, and then we were working together with the federal ministry on creating this national project, which now oversees construction of public spaces all over Russia. And I think that it just became obvious. First from Moscow, but for Moscow it's quite expensive objects. I mean, they should be, because Moscow is the capital. But the most important thing is that you can make quite efficient and impressive regional projects for quite a realistic amount of money. And the second thing I strongly believe in is that people have been so isolated in Russia in the last years, because we've gone through those 90s when everybody was trying to protect himself and his family and was fighting for his own private interest. And we are now in the phase where we want to come together for certain ideas, be it political ideas, but I'm not a great fan of big political ideas, because it's, I mean, politics is always politics, but also in terms of communal living. And I think that people, from what I see, when people come together in those meetings, when they want to engage in this process, when they want to influence the future of their park and the future of their town, I see a lot of urge for uniting together. And I think that this is, I mean, a very important long-term effect of what we're doing, because people want to get united, people want a place to come together, to meet each other, to communicate, people want to make decisions together. And I think that this is the really good long-term effect. Maybe this is not what the officials want when they started this project, because whenever people get to meet each other, whenever they get consolidated, they can be consolidated on quite a few different reasons and for a lot of different sets of aims. So I think there is a small bomb which we create, because I think that people who experience this change, they start demanding when they feel that they can influence the future of the park. They start asking questions. Why can I not influence the future of the school or the future of the hospital or the future of the roads? I think it's a good question we should all be asking.
So, yeah, following your explanation, I would like to say that the experience say that this process is the beginning of something bigger. In the places where there are, I would say, political stability and continuity on the ideas, then things really change the cities. So let's say that doing parks and doing public space is something fundamental. And I think that the challenge is what will be next. So my question is, do you think that this idea could be applying also to the public buildings? So let's say to the schools, to the libraries, to the small hospital, to the sports center. Are you planning to do such a program in Tatarstan?
Thank you so much. I think we actually have created a number of public facilities following this pattern, but I have to say that I struggle a lot with that, and I will tell you why. And I think that this is the key task that will be set in front of our colleagues from Tatarstan who will be coming back after getting education here. The problem is that in order to be efficient and in order to create a lot of added value for people, you need professional managers who can set the program. So the people who are responsible for managing cultural institutions, they need to be trained to easily and quickly and very precisely identify types of things they want people to be doing in the space, types of visitors they're gonna be having in this space, all that sort of stuff. The key problem, the same applies to educational sphere, the same applies to anything. Medicine, of course, because the thing is, actually it's very easy to construct. It's very easy to make a tender and get a contractor who would renew the old hospital. What is hard is to rethink the process of serving, like giving people medical service, to think of how they feel in this space. And instead of renovating the old Soviet clinic, try and introduce a different approach. This demands a lot of expertise on behalf of the state manager. They somehow tend to either not want it or to expect that the architect will do that instead of them. But the thing is, no architect, I mean, of course, there are certain geniuses, but I think there are more managers and visionaries than architects in that case. There are certain people who would get into the detail and who would identify what the library should be like, to get a vision of what the library is, because obviously it's not about books nowadays, because all the information is online. But if you go into the idea of the library, which gives access to information, and if we analyze the qualities of information that we can get online for free, it will be obvious that all the information, or like a huge part of the information that is really valuable, only comes for a price. So maybe for a modern library, it would make sense to allocate money not just to buy books, but to get access to different online libraries, scientific libraries, to get access to the good quality online magazines, to actually provide people with access to information. Or another option would be to, for instance, upload the newest programs, software that an architect needs, that a music composer needs, that a filmmaker needs, because they are expensive. Not everyone can afford to have them. So if you could come to some library, take a computer and work with this software, that would really do something important for you. This would not just be space, which is good in itself, but of course not enough now, because the traditional libraries, in many cases, you don't visit, you don't see why you would spend your time there. So you would maybe rethink this approach to a traditional library, going into philosophy, going into new technology, create a program, then turn to an architect, and then only come with a project. And renovating a library would not be something limited to putting new colors on the walls, which it actually is, unfortunately. But the good thing about parks, something that made it very simple for me, for instance, is that no one cared about parks. There was no minister responsible for parks. There was no money allocated for parks. So everybody, when we started this project, thought that this is just some a useless initiative which is not taking anyone anywhere. They will spend 1 billion rubles and it will just go away. So there was not a lot of reaction to what I was doing in the beginning, because they were not people who would lose money. They were not people who would lose power. Whenever you want to try and to get into this process with any other types of public facilities, you always have a minister who doesn't want you to be smarter than him or her. You always get someone who is expecting to get this contract, because also the problem is that the contractor who normally does this typical low quality and low qualification work, like putting the new colors on the walls, they're used to doing this job. They are not used to working with different materials, because that would make them to educate their workers, and this makes a lot of investment, needs a lot of investment. People are not willing to actually make. So, you know, it's a lot of complicated issues, but I'm pretty sure that if there is a place in Russia, among the Russian regions, that has the will to do that, this will eventually be Tatarstan. Maybe it's a bit harder than you want it to be, but I think we're finally getting there.
Thank you. So I think that something fascinating is that before I was mentioning some cities like Barcelona, Medellin, or Bandung, that in fact this process was somehow led by the mayors directly, by Maragall, by Fajardo, or by Radwan Kamil. But in your case, somehow was an advisor of the president, that obviously your work was to deal with the whole republic that was doing this. And I like very much how you explained this idea that you have invented a new place to do projects. So if you try to get the money of someone in order to do something, that's difficult. But if no one take care about something, and then you decide to create a new place where to act, and you are able to grow like this is harder at the beginning, but if you are successful, let's say you can get the credit for the future development.
It's easier in the beginning. It gets harder the moment you get the budget and the power, because the moment you get the budget and the power, there would be a lot of people who want to stand in your place. Before you don't have the budget and you don't have obvious influence, it's just not a problem. But the moment the mayors of the city feel they are at risk, because if they don't do their job, I will inform their boss that they're not doing their job, they want me out of this position. Well, some of them want. So I think, yeah, but the best way to make change is go to somewhere where nothing exists. But you cannot repair the world like this. There will be a moment when you have to go into the fight.
Great. So I would like now to open this discussion to the public, because it would be great to have questions. As you know, we are developing here in the Shukhov Lab the program Prototyping Future Cities, and we are trying to create new forms of professionals that are not only architects. I like very much how you support architects, because in these cities that I mentioned before, there was someone that was able to integrate through the design. So there is a political will, and then you need to have something that is a project that integrates many things, the people, let's say, choices, the possibility to use some materials, the reality of the place, the budget, and then at some point, we are able to do something. And something we are trying to learn here is that, I mean, to make a city something very complex. So what I'm happy is that today you understand that Natalia is not an architect, but is someone that is fighting for the city like a hell in order to create the space and to protect creativity and the progress for the city.